You're listening to the Better for America podcast, presented by Amac, the Association of Mature American Citizens.
Hello, everyone. I'm Rebecca Weber, and this is your Amac podcast, Better for America. Today, we welcome a true, dedicated, a proven patriot, and someone who has walked the walk and today brings that experience to Washington from the heart of Texas, Congressman Jake Ellzey. And Congressman Ellzey is a distinguished, decorated U.S. Navy fighter pilot who has flown the best airplanes America has and recorded 820 carrier landings. He is at home in the cockpits of the F-18 and the F-14 and the Black Hawk, and he has been at the heart of the fight embedded with the Navy SEALs as a joint terminal attack controller and deployed 9 times, 5 combat tours over Afghanistan, 2 over Iraq. And as if that couldn't be enough, he was also the air boss on the USS Ronald Reagan, which is a great carrier named for a great president. Now, today, Congressman Jake Ellzey is, in my opinion, is as outspoken as the Gipper. He represents the 6th District of Texas, and it is a real honor to have him with us to talk about the state of our nation and our future, the future of America, a land that we all love. Welcome, Congressman and Patriot Jake Ellzey. We're so glad to have you with us today.
Thank you so much. It's great to be with y'all today. You know, this you mentioned the one of our great presidents that I was honored to serve on his carrier. Ronald Reagan is who I fashioned myself after. And, you know, Ronald Reagan always had a sunny disposition, and he always felt that our best days were ahead of us. And I believe the same thing. And I know that most of your listeners do too. And the 208,000 AMAC members in the state of Texas, I know that they're looking forward to some brighter days ahead when so much during this time of hope seems to be darkness coming from the White House and the leadership in Congress right now. And I don't believe any of it.
Well, you know, Congressman, you really have done it all, and it's hard to imagine 820 carrier landings on an aircraft carrier. And some of those, as we mentioned, on the USS Ronald Reagan itself. I guess before we dive into the issues of the day, I have to ask you, I guess a two-edged question. First, did you enjoy your time as a Navy pilot and serving our nation? And would you have any thoughts for those who wonder how prepared we are today as you look at the big threats that we're facing in the Middle East, the Far East, and even in Europe? Do you have any big concerns?
Well, the first part of your question is yes, I did it for 20 years and I wouldn't have stuck around for that long if I didn't enjoy it. And there were some scary times, there were some boring times, there were some frustrating times, but all in all, you know, as I look back on a 20-year Navy career that spanned from 1992 to 2012, I was a participant in history, both in making war, but also providing peace and disaster relief. I got to participate in the tsunami relief in Medan, Indonesia in 2005 while I was on the Abraham Lincoln, and again in 2011 when the tsunami hit Japan. So much of what the United States does is protect the rest of the earth, but we also, the rest of the world, but we also provide relief to the rest of the world. And sometimes that goodness of our country, the intrinsic goodness of this country that God created, goes unnoticed. And certainly if you pay attention to Pravda or Zvestia, which is what the today's media is, they will never talk about that. They aim to divide us. They seek to divide us according to race by capitalizing the color of our skin when it's used as a descriptor of who we are. That is not who we are. I've served alongside Americans of all stripes, and this is the best country that has ever existed. And those on the left who would aim to divide us, also they aim to divide who we are as a nation and shred our Constitution. And I won't stand for it. And that's why I'm proud to be in Texas. To those who would want to serve our country, who are looking to with a servant's heart, who want to provide for our nation's defense, we are prepared. And again, when you listen to the media, what you hear coming from Washington, D.C. is a bunch of folks who are of like mind with those most radical politicians we have in our country who aim to strike down our country and make it all seem bad. If you think about what the president released, the White House released this morning about those who are unvaccinated, there's a word that I use at home for what kind of talk that is about how you're going to harm other people. I've never seen anything like this. And I know that the president's not putting this out. Somebody in this administration is. This country is ready for all threats. We are ready to have to live with COVID. This is going to be a reality, but we need to learn to live again instead of being forced into fear and then being convinced that the government is going to provide us safety. That's right out of an Orwellian book, and I don't believe any of it. And we're going to keep pushing back. The American people don't either. So the 10% who watch MSNBC and the 10% in Washington, D.C. who spout that kind of stuff, they're full of it, but they will lead you to be afraid of everything on this planet. And I'm not buying into it. I am a Reagan Republican. Let's look towards our brighter days. Our country's prepared for whatever threats are out there, regardless of what the media says. And the American people are ready to move on and live.
Yeah, that is great. I love to hear you say that. It's so encouraging. And here at AMAC, we are all about courage, not fear. We're not buying it either. So thank you, Congressman, because you are so straightforward in many of your positions. And that also starts with serving veterans. An AMAC's membership organization, we have over 2.4 million members. Roughly a third are veterans, almost 3 times that number with veterans in their families. So I do want to ask you, are we doing enough for our veterans? Honestly, really, can we ever do enough? I don't think so. But how do we get a tighter focus on the real needs of our veterans, from job placement benefits, housing, healthcare, and really the responsiveness of the Veterans Administration?
That is a great question. First of all, we don't do enough for our active duty families as it is right now, and in a time of 6.8%, and that's the minimum of inflation of what we're seeing right now. A 2.7% pay raise for our active duty service members, which is an all volunteer force, and only 1 out of 100 Americans serve right now. We're not doing enough for our families. We're not doing enough for our military, and we don't do a very good job at all of training our military to become civilians again. We do a fantastic job of preparing them for combat and for service in the military, but as they seek to leave the service of and sacrifice to this country, we need to make sure that they are prepared to be a civilian again. And I have a vital Assessment Act bill that passed through the House. The companion is John Cornyn, to help student veterans succeed in college as they go forward. But also we need to ensure that the day that a military member steps out of uniform and into a suit or whatever construction outfit, whatever they're wearing, that they have the disability rating that they deserve. They have the proper avenues with which to go to in case they need any kind of help, as well as their families. So the short answer is you can never do enough. But as we've had 20 years of war, we need to ensure that we take care of those who shall have borne the battle, and his widow and his orphan, as Lincoln said. And we can always do better on that. And I'm proud to be on the Veterans Affairs Committee. And we work really, actually, when you talk about the doubt about where our nation is and how split we are ideologically, I would encourage you in this, that my Vital Assessment Act bill passed through the VA committee unanimously. And that's majority Democrats and minority Republicans on that committee. So if it's one thing that Americans can agree upon, with the passage of the National Defense Authorization Act and with veterans issues, we are united. That should give every American and every listener here today, and how many did you say, 800,000 veterans listening, if they are tuning in, brighter days are ahead. We all agree on veterans and defense of our nation. So take hope in this season of hope. Take hope.
Take hope. I love that. And AMAC is so strongly supportive, and we have been for years of legislation to assist and really recognize and support and demonstrate our gratitude to all veterans who protect us all. So for any veteran listening out there, I mean, we love you. This nation is great because of you. We appreciate you, and we as a nation need to do more to recognize you. So thank you, Congressman, for your service, and for service to our nation. I do want to move to another issue that has recently been in the news and likely will be a lot more in the news. First with the Rittenhouse verdict, and then with the Supreme Court hearing a case that may open Second Amendment concealed carry rights in states that have severely restricted the right to get a permit. So first, I want to ask you, very broadly, how important is the Second Amendment, especially in a time when we see police defunding by Democrats and we see rising violence and homicides rising across the country? Mm-hmm. And then after you comment on the importance of our Second Amendment, what people need to understand about our Second Amendment, how important is the Rittenhouse case and a general defense of the Second Amendment Because to many of our members, it appears to be under threat. And I think that they would like to hear that there are members of Congress that are fighting to preserve their Second Amendment rights.
Thankfully, the Texas legislature has always been strong on protecting and preserving and expanding Second Amendment rights that are guaranteed by our Constitution and the Bill of Rights. One thing you're not hearing about right now is any anti-gun legislation in the U.S. Congress. And the reason for that is, if you can find me a group that sends out polls more than the Democrat Party in Washington, D.C., you're not going to find any. So what are their polls saying right now in a time of smash and grab and rising crime rates, especially in the cities that have the most stringent gun control laws? You're not going to find anybody in Congress that's willing to say, you know what, we're going to take rights away from the American people, because we've asked for defund the police. We've seen a corresponding rise in crime. There is a correlation, and now we're not going to let you defend yourself. That's not happening, and there's a reason for that, is because even the most strident gun control folks recognize that's not going anywhere, because people are afraid and they have a right to defend themselves. No matter how you feel about what kind of weapon you can carry or where you can carry it or how, the right to self-defense right now is more important than it's ever been, because for those who govern, for whom life is but an academic exercise, and that is the people on the left who don't live in the real world and never have, self-defense is something that they don't need to worry about, because it's usually the people who have paid private security that don't need to worry about it. But the rest of us are worried about the rising crime in this nation, the lawlessness that's occurred and been encouraged, the seemingly biased towards protest, anti-COVID folk, the folks who are saying you need to lock down in your house, but we're going to leave the border open and allow 2 million unvaccinated, untested, illegal immigrants come through our southern border. We're going to fly them to different cities in our nation, and everything's okay. But you have to lock down in your home, and you have to take the vaccine, and you have to wear a mask. There's not one, it's a broader question. It's not just one thing that we're talking about here. We're looking at an administration for whom, when you take the oath of office to protect and defend the Constitution of the United States, which specifically addresses keeping the American people safe, the only people that this administration seems to be convinced about keeping safe are people who aren't Americans. They're not ensuring that we have low fuel costs. Our fuel costs are skyrocketing. If you're trying to heat your home, we've shut down the Keystone pipeline. And we know that now we're importing oil from Iran, which is the largest state sponsor of terror. We're looking for another nuclear deal. There's 175,000 troops massed on Ukraine because Putin knows that this administration is weak. And we have 2 million people that came into this country that came from all over this planet. They didn't come from Mexico. They came from Central America and other parts. We know that they weren't vaccinated. We know that they were exposed to COVID, except instead of asking for 87,000 new Border Patrol troops, we've asked for 87,000 new IRS agents. Everything this administration has done has been to the detriment of the American people, the detriment of our economy, the detriment of our safety, and the threat of conflict around the world. I think it's ironic that when you talk about where everybody went when everybody in this administration took 20 jets to a climate conference in Glasgow, Scotland, worried about saying that the climate change is our greatest threat. Well, when you do something like that, climate change, okay. When you show weakness with an Afghanistan withdrawal that left $80 billion worth of arms to now a terrorist nation, the Taliban, that sent a signal to China and Russia that you are not willing to defend this country. And so now we've got 175,000 troops massed on the border of Ukraine. The threat of conflict is what harms the climate. A world conflagration of combat is what harms the climate. We all remember the images from 1991 when Saddam Hussein lit off those oil wells. That is what causes climate destruction, war. And if you're going to be weak, that leads to war.
Yeah, that's a great point. And we are living in a time of enormous challenge from China and Russia and Iran. And you're really leading me into my next question that I have for you. You do have a unique perspective on what is happening in the world today, and events do move very fast. They cast a long shadow forward. Give us a sense, if you could. I know you started on the national security front, specifically about how the Biden administration left Afghanistan. People need to understand that there could have been a better way? And then why do you think that the hardest choices ahead may be those decisions we make relating to China and Russia? Because we seem to be dealing with a number of threats, and I wonder how we should be prioritizing them. Perhaps explain the impact of the Afghanistan withdrawal debacle, having seen all of this from the inside as a naval aviator and leader, and what that means as it relates to China and Russia.
Well, first of all, let's examine the two leaders, if you can call them that, of Russia and China. Both of them came from fairly moderate backgrounds, although Xi Jinping was a prince. His father was one of the leaders of China with Mao Zedong, and then he was banished. So Xi Jinping had that shame foisted upon him, and Vladimir Putin was just a mid-level KGB agent, but then they attained great power and eventually leader for life mantles. So let's assume for a second that the definition of those two men is dictator, okay? Putin likes to run around with his shirt off and show how strong he is. Xi Jinping, on the other hand, walked around or has banned Winnie the Pooh because of the comparison between him and Winnie the Pooh. So you have two presidents for life, let's call them dictators, who have an inferiority complex. And when you have strong militaries, you decide to saber rattle. That's a dangerous place, and it reminds me of 1938. If you pull out of Afghanistan in the way we did, we set an arbitrary timeline that had nothing to do with strategic or even tactical considerations put in place. You leave thousands of Americans in Afghanistan and most of our allies who helped us out in a 20-year war, plus $80 billion worth of equipment. That sends a signal to guys like Xi Jinping and Vladimir Putin that whoever's running the show is not firm and strong and willing to punch back. That's why we took a trip to the Indo-PACOM region. Senator Cornyn led a group, and then another congressional group went afterwards to encourage our allies that when it comes down to it, we're not going to stand idly by. So don't threaten Taiwan, don't threaten Ukraine, and everybody's sort of waking up to what Xi Jinping actually is. And when we got a brief from the foreign minister of India when we were over there, he was the ambassador to China from 2009 to 2013. We said, did y'all see this coming? Nobody saw Xi Jinping coming the way he did. So it's time for the world to respond. And if we don't respond, we are looking at a conflict. So we have to push back. And I can tell you that our military is ready, and we need to impress upon the Chinese and the Russians. We are ready, and we're ready to defend these nations. We've always had a strategic ambiguity about what we would do with Taiwan. But that was at a different time with a different philosophy that the mainland China had. And what they showed in Hong Kong is that they can't be trusted. Hong Kong was not supposed to turn out the way it is right now. So we need to not be strategically ambiguous anymore. We need to be very fervent and say, we're not ambiguous anymore. We are firmly going to defend Taiwan. Taiwan makes 60% of the world's chips, microprocessor chips. So there's a strategic need to defend Taiwan. And we need to make it very clear. And I, as a congressman, am willing to do so myself and say, I'm completely convinced that we need to ally with Taiwan, much like Israel, the only democracy in the region. They need to be our friends, and we need to defend our friends. And if you punch them, we'll punch you back harder. That's the only thing bullies respond to. Schoolyard bullies only respond to getting punched back in the face or the threat of it. And we need to convince them that that's what we will do. Having been in war, I don't want war. My son is 10 years old. I don't want him to go to war. I have seen the tragedy of war. I know what it means. I'm not a hawk. I am simply somebody who says, if you don't defend you and yours, then somebody's going to take what you have.
Yeah, Congressman, thank you for sharing that. People need to hear this. Unfortunately, we have a president who isn't speaking to the American public about these kinds of things. He's talking about other things, instilling fear, I think, in the general public and really turning a blind eye to the major threats. All the while, he talks about global warming and climate change being the greatest number one threat that America faces while he falls asleep at a summit meeting. So I think the
Right.
American people are seeing that there's the truth is not getting out. And this is why we do this podcast. We do this podcast so people can see and hear the brave, courageous men and women like yourself that are really rolling up your sleeves each and every day, caring about the future of this country. So thank you. I do want to shift to another topic, and that a topic that's on, I think, many minds. So many AMAC members are defenders of life. They believe that there is a precious life, a child in the womb. And the issue of saving that young life, of preserving that life that God has sanctioned and created is now daily politicized. It's turned into a political game by many. And recently, as the US Supreme Court heard arguments about the efficacy, the reasoning, the durability of Roe v. Wade, which I think is a case that many really have doubted for a long time. Can you offer your thoughts first on the Roe v. Wade decision or the idea of abortion, which I'm from New York, and in New York now they're allowing abortion right up until the time of birth. And also on the idea that some are trying to delegitimize the US Supreme Court. They're really trying to intimidate and make political that branch, which has always been very independent. Can you share your thoughts there?
Sure. Well, the issue of Roe we are seeing for the first time a real possibility that Roe gets struck, and I'm grateful for that. It was never supposed to be in the Constitution. It shouldn't be in the Constitution. And if you are an adherent to the Constitution, then it should be a state's issue. Now, I think it should be outlawed everywhere. I am a pro-lifer. I was a co-author of the Heartbeat Bill in Texas, and life is precious. And what New York does is effectively that's infanticide. And I think what you see on the left is a desire to change the meaning of words. And we see so many bills that come from the left in Congress that have nothing to do with what the title of the bill is. So as I listen to the pro-abortion people talk, I hear them use the term reproductive rights. Reproductive rights, that's not what it is. They keep changing the definition. The CDC changed the definition of vaccine to fit what the COVID vaccine is. It used to be something that prevented a disease such as polio or smallpox. Now it's something that just alleviates the symptoms. So that by that term, there are a lot of things that used to be shots that can now be vaccines. So let's start with that. They changed the wording to fit their definition of what it is. So let's go to the Heartbeat Bill in Texas. The current status of the Heartbeat Bill in Texas is on December 10th, the Supreme Court ruled that bill can go into effect. It threw out the Department of Justice case against Texas. However, it allowed abortion providers to file suit against the law. So in Travis County, there's a suit going forward. The Mississippi 15-week abortion ban, their ruling in the Supreme Court's ruling in Dobbs could return to the abortion policy debate to all the states to have the individual state legislatures and governor decide what is acceptable abortion laws for that state. And so while we are pro-life here, again, it should come out of the supremacy of the United States Supreme Court. And so we're headed towards that. And I'm really hopeful that happens. The politicization of everything is de rigueur for the left today. So everything is politicized. COVID is politicized. Follow the science, but we're going to have a different science over here than we are over here. Everything they do is politicized, and it's an effort to. And frankly, from where I look today, based on the if you haven't looked at what the White House said this morning about, for you unvaccinated, prepare for a winter of death. At a time of Christmas, on December 21st, to issue that. This is an effort for humanists to destroy religion in this country too. I believe that. They're trying to overwhelm what the season of Christmas is about and make it about something else. And it's about fear of COVID, and we are going to provide you the safety. That's right out of Marxist 1984 kind of stuff. And I want you to know that when I walk around Washington, D.C., and I look at what the media says and who they go after, it's a bunch of 25 to 30-year-olds who are of like mind of the squad. They surround them, they interview them, then they put it on TV. The majority of the United States, and I would argue about 80% of the United States, don't believe that stuff. You and I both know that. But that's what you see on TV, but it's not an indicator of where this country is going. Our brightest days are ahead. And I know we're running out of time, and I appreciate all your time today. Thanks for letting me ramble on a little bit and talk about the things that are important to me.
Oh, it really is so important, Congressman. I do have one last question, but before I do want to just make a quick comment here. It seems today that the difference between people who, are like what AOC is saying versus those people who wish we could go back to some of the policies that Donald Trump put in place. The major difference there, in my personal view, with the people I've spoken with, is such a deep difference in that those people who believe in a God, people who believe in inalienable rights that were given to us by a God, people who understand the value of life, versus those people who want to be God and people who don't really believe in a higher power and a God. And if you look at a lot of these issues, it really seems to come to that, like you said, defining words, redefining what it means when we talk about life, letting a mother define whether or not her child is a boy or a girl, or a teacher define if a child is a boy or a girl. These kinds of things, they just seem so foreign. It's not the America that we all know that makes our nation great. So I do appreciate you pointing all of that out. It is so important, and your candor and your conviction is well heard. So I appreciate your thoughts there. I do have one last question, and I'm wondering if you have any thoughts on this. It's a two-edged question, I think. What can Americans expect in 2022? Are we going to be able to change the direction of this great country? And what can people do? What can AMAC members do to help restore accountability at the federal level in our federal government?
Well, I think one thing AMAC does very, very well is vet candidates. In my race for Congress, the best attended event that we had to discern between the candidates was an AMAC event. And I'm very grateful for that. And it was a jungle primary, so anybody could show up. It was a Republican and Democrat special election. And AMAC does a great job of that. AMAC continues, and I think AMAC is a think tank as well. Some of the thoughts on how to preserve Social Security, some of the avenues that I agree with and am for come from your organization. So community involvement, prayer for this country. But I'll tell you, you asked me a question about what's going to happen in 2022. It's been my observation, and I love to just observe. I sit back and observe. I watch faces as 20 years in the military, being led well and led poorly, and leading well and sometimes being short on that. I watch people and see what they're thinking. And so my thought is that what you see on TV represents a small fraction of what most of the people in this country believe. They recognize that, number one, COVID is something we're going to have to live with. It's not going anywhere, but it is a virus. And whenever you hear somebody say, we're going to stop this virus, they're lying to you. You can't stop a virus, but you are going to have to live with it. And the idea that you have to inject something into your body that for which the definition of vaccine has changed is absolutely ludicrous. But the more transmissible it gets, the less lethal it gets as well. This was unleashed on us by China. I'm not convinced where it came from. I have my thoughts on it, but without evidence, I'm not going to further those. But I have my ideas. But it came from China. It affected the entire world. Fentanyl comes from China. They are launching cyber attacks on us. They are our adversary, and we need to start withdrawing from them and let their country and their economy collapse eventually. But our brighter days are ahead. We know that. So let's identify that. Let's elect conservatives who believe in the sanctity of life, who believe that this is the best country that's ever existed. We are good. There is good and evil in this world, and the United States is good. So if you're getting the argument from the people within this country that we are not good, they're trying to do something which is tear down what we currently have in the United States and make us something else. My question to them is, what would you have us emulate in this world? We're the most generous, unselfish nation that has ever existed on this planet. Which nation would you rather have us emulate? Cuba, Venezuela, China, Russia? what would you have us look like? And if that's the kind of government you like, instead of flying illegal immigrants throughout this nation, we'll fly you to China and you can live there. You can be told what to say, told what to think, have every electronic device that you have monitored. We can have you, they can have you disappeared if you disagree with them. The number of things that people say about this country, don't believe the hype. So what you see on MSNBC is a bunch of bull. We are the best country that's ever existed. And the majority of the American people know it. We're going to get 37 to 40 seats when we have the 2022 election. Then it's going to be time to govern. And then it's going to be time to restore the rights that are guaranteed us in the Constitution. It's time to start cutting back and having some fiscal responsibility within this government. And it's time to start withdrawing the power that these unelected bureaucrats in all these agencies have. The fact that the Centers for Disease Control can tell landlords they can't charge rent on their properties, that's not anywhere in the Constitution. That's extra constitutional. And the executive branch agencies that have attained so much power, most of which have their own law enforcement agencies, we need to pull that back. That's the responsibility of the Congress. And so we need to repeal the Administrative Procedures Act from 1948 and have Congress do its job. The executive branch execute the laws that are passed by the Congress. And we need to severely cut back on our spending, because we're at 122% of national debt to GDP, which hasn't been seen since 1946. We can't survive that way. So it's time to start making some hard choices. That's what we're elected to do.
Yeah, these are really important points, each and every one of them. And I think that if people do want to fundamentally change this nation, one way to do it is pack the Supreme Court. So we see efforts being made there. Redefine language, erase history, insert CRT, go after our youth, insert fearmonger people. You know, it's interesting. I was just in Florida, and when I was down there in Florida, it really did feel like a different world. When I was in Texas, it felt like a different world in a very good way compared to being here in New York. And when I spoke with the locals, I said, many elderly people, when I say elderly, I mean in their 80s and 90s, that I ran into at CVS. And I said to these an older couple, man and woman, I said, are you fearful you don't have a mask on? They were in their 80s, and they said, not at all. We're vaccinated and boosted, and that's not the way we live our life. So I think that when you've got governors that are hell-bent on controlling people, and you've got these people in positions of power that are talking about how bad America is, you've got to think, what motive do they have to say that when we know that it's not the truth? And sometimes you've got to stop, pause, think, and use common sense. And that's what you've done with us here today, Congressman. You've really shed some really great light on these topics and thoughts. So I want to thank you so much, because you are a real inspiration and a patriot who inspires respect and also encourages us to do more and believe in the future. Thanks for joining me. I hope we can get you back with us again today, because I could talk to you for another hour about the border and about the vaccine and a bunch of other things. So we'll have to have you come back.
Well, I'd love to come back. I've got a lot of time, and I want to say this, that Amac, since I've run for office a couple of times, and every time Amac is an organization that represents Americans who are concerned about the direction of our country and what it represents. And they have given me a lot of good ideas about what to be for in Congress. And so again, I'd like to say you are an essential think tank, in addition to an organization that helps senior Americans. You are a think tank who does your homework and uses empirical based paper to help preserve this country. What you do is very important. And for those who are listening who are new to AMAC, I'm here to tell you, AMAC is a growing organization that is going to be speaking out for patriotic, conservative Americans who believe in freedom and the Constitution and the sanctity of life and the ability to worship as you see fit, and pushing back against a leftist Marxist ideology that is starting to pervade this nation. But like I said, Ecclesiastes 1:9 says there's nothing new under the sun. We have been here before. We have suffered through civil war. We have suffered through civil strife. We're going to make it through again. You're seeing parents stand up in their school boards and take the education of their children back, and parenting their kids again, and not letting the pervasive ideas of CRT permeate through those young minds of theirs. Americans are pushing back. So take hope, take heart. When we take back the House and the Senate in 2022, and then the White House in 2024, This is a reawakening of what America is supposed to be. We've been asleep for a little while, and that's when evil seeps in. But now we're waking up, we're standing up, and we're going to take this nation back. So take heart in that. God didn't put this nation on this earth to go through and then fail now. I don't believe it. And we're gonna take this nation back with your help, and I'm grateful for it.
Well, thank you. Thank you for all the years and the lifetime of your service you have given this great nation. And thank you for your example, for your willingness to get into the arena and serve again in Congress now. And we are so grateful. We will be here to support legislation and your leadership as needed to lift this country back to where we belong. So thanks again for being in the fight and for what you do each and every day for all of us. And our members do appreciate it. They appreciate good leadership. They honor yours and all that you have done. So we will definitely have you back again. And for those listening, courage, not fear. Courage, not fear. That is my mantra for 2022. AMAC is strong. We're here to defend all of your rights and to educate people on the issues. Go to amac.us. And if you haven't downloaded the AMAC News app, it's a great new AMAC News app that we've got for everyone listening. It doesn't cost anything. You'll get breaking news right there on your smartphone. Just search for AMAC. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in today. Please be sure to watch, listen, like, and share this podcast with friends and family. To all of you out there listening, Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, be safe and be well. Until next time, I'm Rebecca Weber. This is your podcast, Better for America. Thanks for joining us and have a great day, everyone.
Thank you for listening to the Better for America podcast. To learn more about AMAC and all it has to offer, visit us at www.amac.us.